Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about us at officehours.global. If you are watching now, the first hour is going to be a general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about the future of co-working spaces. So we're going to talk a little bit about what do they mean now and how do we work with them. Tomorrow, of course, we have the long day education, which runs from 8 until 10. It's not broadcasted to YouTube, but it's a great conversation. I would highly recommend joining our Zoom link to do that. And then we have the Super Saturday, and Dennis has a little video to play for us.
Tomorrow, the longest Saturday of the year down under, Office Hours brings you a long day with a difference.
Super Saturday!
The day starts at 3 p.m. UTC with an hour of live Q&A from Office Hours, immediately followed by the Education Hour, available only on Zoom. Then, at 7 p.m, Shannon Cooper hosts the Office Hours cooking show, where she, Alex Lindsay and Dennis Champion Walker cook along with Damianti Garja, who will be making Mexican rice. At 8 p.m, Todd Reynolds brings us a live concert from his studio in North Adams, Massachusetts. Then at 9 p.m, we cross to the Accidental Theatre in Belfast for an hour of entertainment in the Belfast Method. And at 10 p.m, we bring you a special edition of Conversations with Tony Mobley, featuring Todd Reynolds, Hasmut Garja and Richard Lavery. And that's what's coming up tomorrow on Super Saturday. See you there.
Is that Space Doctor?
Thanks. That is our space doctor. So Vienna, that's great. All right, excellent. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Courtney, take it away.
All right, thank you, Alex. First up, from Jonas Dutel, let me rearrange my screen because the big pop-up came up there. It says, does anyone know of a good production clock that is synced across PCs?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes, I do. Doug Johnson has this one that is available at djprod.biz/clock. And it's synchronized, and he takes care to synchronize it with the NIST. It's available anywhere. You can just bring it up on any PC that has a connection to the internet, and you set your time zone and everything else at the top. It has a little row of settings at the top there. And you can make it full screen, and you can just send it anywhere in your production.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, there's a company called Time Machines that actually builds true production clocks. We have one in our truck. They plug into the internet, and they get perfect time every time.
And another website that we use a lot is called time.is, time.is, and you just put it in, and it'll pop up, and you can throw in multiple zones, and it'll give you different times across that as well. And we find that to be fairly accurate. The one that we use on the iPad and the iPhone is called Atomic Clock, and it will sync to a remote, and you can get the kind of the BBC view of it, and you turn the seconds on. It makes it feel like time is moving slower. I don't know exactly how that happens, but seeing the little dots go around, it's very hypnotic. But we literally put them on whole, like 13-inch iPads, and just stick them, like mount them up when we're doing productions, and that'll keep everybody synced as well. Next question. I can't hear you, Courtney.
Sorry, this big window has me flummoxed. Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York says, is there a best method of matching color and brightness on different brand displays on different computers, Mac and PC? Should I use the display profiles in macOS and the hardware controls on the display, or both?
Go ahead, Hosmer.
Yeah, one of the things you learn when you in office hours, you get lots of advice on what to buy. So I purchased something called Spider X from Data Color to calibrate my monitors. I do it once a month, and once it's gone through the calibration, you can save that profile in your Mac OS, and you call that up every time you want to make sure your monitor is calibrated.
Go TJ.
To follow on what Hosmuk said, yes, you'll actually be using both. You'll want to get something like a data color spider, some sort of color calibrator for your monitor, and as it walks you through the process of calibrating, you will adjust the controls on your monitor to kind of get the monitor in a good medium position. And then in the data color software, there is a mode where you can calibrate and try to color match multiple monitors. And it is a bit on the complex side, and it's not always perfect. I have many monitors, and it's really hard to get them all to line up really precisely.
Yeah, one thing that that you have to be careful with is if you turn the monitors off and you turn them back on, they could go into a different state. All the spider does is tell the computer what to send the monitor based on what it measured at the moment that you calibrated it. So if we want to calibrate that, if we're going to use it, if I'm going to use it with a spider, which I have and I use often, is I'm paying attention to color right now, and I calibrate it right then. In the color space that I'm, in the color that I have in my room and everything else. I just do it right at that moment, so that I know that screen is good. I try not to actually worry about all my monitors looking the same. In fact, many times in production, we make the monitors look specifically wrong so that there's one monitor that is the truth. Like this is the one that we care about, and we kind of move the other ones away. We've done like no work on the other ones specifically because when a client says, I don't think the color's right, we just tell them that's not the right monitor. You got to look over there. Look over there, because trying to keep all of them in sync has been almost impossible. And so you end up with people arguing about reds on a monitor that doesn't look like the one that is color correct. And so the only monitor I trust is my phone. As far as color goes, my iPhone Apple spends billions of dollars to make that accurate. So I put that up next to a monitor that I've color corrected. And if it doesn't look like my phone on a stream, if I have the same thing going out to both of them, then I do it again. Now go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, in the old days, it was easy because color monitors were really expensive and everything was black and white in the control room except the program and the preview.
Yeah.
And getting those to match was a pain too.
Yeah. Sky.
Well, in the early days of Red, that was the recommendation, was to turn all of your on-set or in the video village black and white. So you didn't have that argument because we knew it wasn't going to be accurate until you got it into the post-production, into the accurate tuned systems.
I've tried that and they think you're weird. Everybody thinks you're weird if you do all black and white, except for a couple of color ones at this point. But we do tell people that these aren't accurate, and sometimes we put stickers on them and say not accurate.
But being weird is why they hired me. So
okay, there you go. Next question.
It's a feature.
All right. Coming in from Jonas Dettel in Stuttgart, he says, what do people think about Escape 2021 by YouTube? It was an interactive 24-hour live event from YouTube instead of YouTube Rewind.
Not only did I not see it, I didn't even know it happened. so I guess the PR wasn't. Maybe I'm left out of the loop there, but I didn't get the memo. So I don't know and since no one else has raised their hand, I'm not sure if any of us saw it. So I think it's good that they probably stopped doing the rewind because it was pretty contentious. As far as that turned out to be less and less popular every year. So I think that it was a good move there. Go ahead, Chris.
I think part of the reason why I heard this somewhere, part of the reason why they stopped doing a rewind is it became more of a political hot potato to decide who to ask to be a part of it. And there were people feeling left out in different languages and, all the, third rail stuff. So I think that was one of the main reasons why they decided to just back out of it.
Yeah. But I didn't even know that I
Jeffrey, never heard of it till right now.
Did you know about this YouTube, the Escape 2021?
No, I have not. But Chris was pretty close to exactly the reason why they stopped. Yeah. And plus, the last rewind had a lot of backlash to it for some other reasons. So,
next question.
Coming in from Dan Huber in Erie. Maybe Illinois, maybe Indiana, I don't know. He said, listen to Neil Young talk about recording his new album, The Barn, in a barn. He said, because it is a log cabin, the rounded surfaces have no reflection. Is that true?
Go ahead, Marty.
Well, I'm going to say almost, but not quite. Rounded reflections will reflect sound, but not like a billiard ball off of the side of a table. It will disperse or diffract sound in different directions. And so It doesn't sound like a reflection. It keeps the energy in the room, but spreads it out so much that you don't hear a specific reflection. And the wood, like raw wood, is much more porous than a hard surface, so it will absorb some sound as well, unless it was shellacked, which often, but not in a barn.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, you can't get away from physics. The exact point at where the roundness occurs will be the reflection. Although it is greatly, greatly, greatly minimized, you're still going to have a slight amount, just a teeny amount of reflection.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, that's true. Neil Young is one of my favorite artists, and he didn't take geometry in high school because a perfect circle has a single point of contact with a tangent. So the better the circle is, the less chance of there being a reflection. But there are very few perfect circles in the real world out there, and none of them will make Neil Young sound better when he sings.
Go ahead, Chris.
I will say that from a wood standpoint, log cabins do have round surfaces. Yes, it is true.
Go ahead, Sky.
And on the opposite side of that, I've got musicians, friends that actually travel to these different locations to get the reflective surfaces of a cathedral, of a large sanctuary style building. So again, using your space, and this was all before there were plugins and fix things in post, but it made for a good trip and great music.
I heard he put speakers in a barn one. Like, didn't he have a whole thing where you could go out into a boat and he had built these giant speakers that were like two barns or two houses, and it was like the ultimate stereo. I mean, he's been pushing this outer envelope for like 50 years. Anyway, it's great. Next question.
We all remember that Pono player. Okay, from Hosmuk Gajar in Cape Town says, for those using iPhones in production, have you considered the mobile kit from Peak Design?
Go ahead, TJ.
I actually have the Peak Designs mobile tripod, and I actually have, it comes with this really nifty clamp that stows in the column of the tripod that you can hook a mobile phone to, and it is one of the best designed tripods I've ever seen. Being a photographer, I have lots of tripods, and when if you saw me coming in from the cabin, I was using my iPhone on that particular tripod.
Nice. Go ahead, Hosmuk.
Yeah, I also bought a similar tripod, but they've come up with a new Kickstarter kit where they have a whole lot of mobile accessories. So you get this cover, and that cover then has a magnet. And they've also come out with a what I call a creator kit. And with a creator kit, this is all based on magnets. So you clip it on. So there's on the magnet, there's a 1/4-20, and you can put it on any tripod. And then they also have a wall mount. So you can add this onto the wall, take off your phone from this magnet, and then stick it onto the wall. So I found it very useful and very secure with this tripod and the magnet that they have.
Good, Paul.
Yeah, Hosmuk, you're a hard act to follow. I was looking at the creator kit online, and I would definitely consider that. It looks like it comes with like a bike mount. It's got the mag mount. I don't know if the case is waterproof, though. Can you answer that, Hosmuk?
No, look, case is just providing the usual protection like any other case, but you have to release it from the kit. But it's just, I used it last week in a cooking show, and it just snaps onto this, and you put it 1/4-20 onto your tripod, and I never felt so safe as this one.
That's great. Next question.
This one comes in from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. He says, just poking around on Amazon, and I'm seeing these super expensive USB 2 cables from AudioQuest, the most expensive being the Diamond at $800. Is this a ruse, or do they make a difference?
Go ahead, Courtney.
It's a ruse. No, well, if they're certified USB 2, which they have to be certified if they use the USB logo under the certification process for USB, they're just as good as any other cable that's certified. The only difference might be durability. You know, if they have some super fantastic jacket on it that is impervious to everything. Other than that, signal processing is a digital signal. It'll be the same from cable 1 to cable 2. $10 cable probably will pass the signal just as well as an $800 cable.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yes, it is a ruse. And if you like that idea, I've got some oxygen-free speaker cables for sale.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, in the analog world, there are many different metal formulations that go into the copper and the wire and the silver and talk about impedance and capacitance and resistance and all kinds of things that, people will go to great lengths to do subjective tests, between this wire and that wire on their speakers or on their turntable outputs and say, yeah, that sounds different to me, or I can hear that little tinkle more. But in the digital world, the signal is either there or it's not. If you're going long lengths, there are some ways that a cable can make the signal unstable, but otherwise, no.
They sell a 2-pole, like a figure 8 plug that's 2 meters long for $130. I'm sorry. All right, next question.
There's a sucker born every minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, coming in from Dan Goldstein in Westchester, New York. He says, are there any glaring issues in production workflows or software that may be susceptible to the Log4j vulnerability?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Exploit.
Yeah, if your computer dies, no software is going to run on it. So be careful out there.
Go ahead, Chris.
So my day job is actually working in kind of server software. We've been talking about this a fair bit. From desktop side, it's mostly a Java vulnerability. So I don't know of many production software written in Java. The OBS community was talking about it. That's written in Python, so it's largely okay. But if the software talks to a server, which could be running on Java, which is quite possible, there could be an issue there, but you're probably never going to know. But I think from the desktop software, you're relatively free of it in production world.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Anything that has an Android backend, so like YOLO Box, perfect example right there. That has an Android back. I'm not sure what everything that they can do with something like that, but you definitely want to check all your devices, see what it has the ability to do, and go from there.
Yeah, and the hard part is we're not going to know for a while because the folks that are really smart at this are not going to pull on the reel very quickly. They're going to let that they're going to get in and then utilize the access that they have over a long curve, and then they'll use it for something later, a year from now or 2 years from now. Some of the most insidious ones that have gone out have literally sat nearly dormant for 3, 4, 5 years as they just collect data and not do anything with it. So it's really hard for us to know what's going to happen. Next question.
This one comes in from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. He says the new touchscreen LG 43HT3WJ has some amazing features: 4K Ultra HD, 350 nit camera, 2K Full HD, 2.0 channel, 10 audio channels, 10 watt plus 10 watt microphone, 3 meter pickup range, and Windows 10 IoT Enterprise Basic. Is this 4K worth 3K?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Just a quick perusal of the marketing material. This is not for the home. This is being sold into the business environment, or much like a smart board would be sold into a classroom for some sort of interactive collaboration, therefore the touchscreen and stuff. So is it worth it to the business? Maybe.
Maybe. I think you'd be better off buying those in pieces. I mean, I think you'd end up with a higher quality solution and more control and more modularity. Putting all of those features into one monitor, I'd rather spend $3,000 on pieces. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, these are meant to be left on for long periods of time. We have a Christie one that's a 70-inch, and it is so heavy. It's one of the first generation, so you got to be careful about Well, two things. One is how many touch points that they have. If you're actually going to be using a lot for touch, there's some models like Keenan on the panel. He has, for his emergency management, has the ViewSonic line, and he's super happy with those, and they're much less expensive. So if you're not going to leave them on all the time, I would take a look at the ViewSonic line and then get a separate computer, because you're stuck with that Windows Enterprise OS 10 Web 4.0 OS. So I would say no go.
Yeah, I will say that when you're in Keenan's position, where you're going to be looking at something, your emergency response, and people want to do some kind of scaling or look at something together, I think it kind of makes sense to have a touch screen. But otherwise, for a teaching environment, turning your back to the classes is a kind of a old-fashioned way to do things. So you're better off, I think, with something that some kind of telestrator or something that you sit in front of you. You can sit there and talk to them and have it appear behind you. It's just way more efficient. I've done both of these things, and I would never go back to a whiteboard or anything that sits behind me. Go ahead, Courtney.
Plus, I think it's only 43 inches, which is kind of small for putting it in the front of a classroom. It seems more for personal use. This kind of is the equivalent of the Surface Pro, which Microsoft makes, which is that big 55-inch or 60-inch, which runs a scaled-down version of Windows, and you can't load your own software onto it, and it's a big mess, and it costs $10,000. So.
Yeah, the TV manufacturers don't have a great track record in building operating systems that are actually usable. So Windows is probably, I mean, if you really want something like that, the Surface is probably better. Next question.
Coming in from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis, Minnesota, it says, is anyone aware of an office hour-esque learning environment for nonprofit management, looking for informal, cutting-edge, open-source, generous teaching and learning and sharing specific to that world? Wouldn't it be great if there was an office hours for everything?
Go ahead, Chris.
So nonprofit world is relatively large. You don't specify an industry, so I'm going to give you two, because it's actually a world I used to work in quite a lot. In the US is NTEN, ntn.org, which is kind of nonprofit technology organization. They have a conference, and it looks like they have a few online groups that may or may not be office hours-esque. And if you want something a bit more cutting edge, but very specific to open source software, which is non-profit of a form, there's sustainos.org, and they have a pretty active Slack channel and lots of discussions on funding models and management of open source projects in a kind of collective way, actually. So there'd be two maybe to look at.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
The Small Business Administration has a lot of boards that are put together where they get retired, oftentimes business leaders, and they do provide consulting. So that might be a good resource.
Yeah, and you could have an office hours for everything down the road. So if you did that, you would start with just the media developers, because you need them to be interested. Someone here will think that that's important and want to start it, but they have then the core capacity to do it. If you started with a bunch of nonprofits, they won't know how to do the video part. So you have to start with the video part and then have someone who's passionate about it. You can see this with what Tony Mobley's doing. You can also see it with what Marty and Leo do, where they're taking stuff that we're doing and then they're applying some of it, some Mukana and a couple of things to their Thursday sessions. So Marty, you're still doing those, right? Oh, it's 3:00, right? 3:00 on.
Well, let's see. So it's alternate Thursdays. Yesterday was 3:00 is the Torah Tech Forum. Right. Next week is 7 p.m. These are Eastern times for the Hybrid Ministries Forum.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, you should just do it daily, Marty. It's easier. It's easier to remember when it is. There's been a few times.
Why I did it daily.
Yeah, if you want to come on as our guest panelist, Chris, we'd love to have you.
There's many times in after hours where the discussion has veered off tech, like we've gone into like off-roading and stuff like that, and it gets we pull it back. But it is interesting. You really could do an office hours or after hours about anything. Just last night, I'm flicking through the Twitter or whatever, maybe it was Instagram, one of the stupid things, and it was there was a thing like December 27th is International Lego Build Day.
Yeah.
Build with everybody. So I look at this thing and I'm like, oh, this is going to be cool. This is going to be like after hours. Everybody's going to have their cameras. They're going to be building Legos. No, No, it's build something and then just hashtag it. And I was like,
Right.
they're totally missing the mark. Like you could totally do an after hours just about people sitting around building Legos. It would be fascinating.
I give you that authority, Chris.
Well, yeah, I think about it. I've been thinking about it as we go further and further down this path. I think about it more and more. And definitely one of the things that, like I was thinking about talking to my father as a pretty good trial attorney, and just about trial tactics. Like you could just do office hours for trial attorneys. He and a couple of judges and a couple other people that he knows, because he used to be the pretty high up in the bar, and so and have a bunch of them just talk about trial tactics, like how to they could just have the second hour is like how to introduce evidence, like, or how to cross examination or whatever it is. It would be, and there's people like me that would just watch it for fun, and
would attorneys be would attorneys want to reveal those tactics and ploys and plans and stuff?
Some won't. My father will tell you that he's just an old sick cougar with nothing to lose at this point. Like, he just kind of, that's how he kind of refers to himself. So he teaches trial tactics at Pitt. So he, this is like his thing, and he's actually done like continuing education courses on it. So he has, he doesn't care anymore. Like, and because it's, when you get to a certain level of capacity, like a certain level of being good at it, you don't worry about whether people know your secrets or not, because you understand that, a pitcher can explain how, a major league pitcher can explain how to pitch. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to pitch, so it's, so there's a very vast difference. At the beginning, it seems that way, but in general, hanging on to your knowledge is usually not efficient. That's what I found.
It's one more program in the office hours network.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, Alex, speaking of Office Hours Network, if you had infinite spare time, what would be the next topic that you would create an office/after hours network for?
Cooking, which we're already doing.
Okay, cool.
So it's a $500 billion addressable market. Like that's the, so cooking is the, that's
a lot of people eat.
It turns out they eat every day. Most people eat every day. And so they cook, and most of them should, if they're not cooking, they should be cooking, because what they're feeding you in boxes is horrible for you. Like it will kill you. It is killing us. So anyway, cooking would be definitely the next one that I would focus on, and we're already doing it. Like we're already figuring that out. We haven't gotten to the point where we're have a critical mass where we can all sit around and have discussions, but it's not too far away. Go ahead, Hosmug.
Let's have a small percentage of that $5 billion market.
Yeah.
In After Hours some time ago, Leo Mandel was showing crimping RJ45s on a network cable. And it was a lot of fun, and a lot of people learned something that was kind of tech related, but he was showing how to crimp that cable. And in fact, I went and bought a new crimper because he had this pass through of the cable. And so I think that kind of stuff we did a lot right at the beginning, and it's kind of drifted away. It's something that we should bring back.
Yeah, what's happened is that we have, between the Belfast method and the cooking, we kind of short-circuited Saturdays, in that sense. Now what we're doing now is we're kind of moving. We've brought a little bit of that back with Isadora, where we're kind of playing with that in a slow cook. But yeah, we have to figure that out, and it probably will happen during the week. And I think that slow content. I think there's put out a quick video on YouTube, have a second hour here that discusses a subject, and then have slow content where we're kind of all just kind of nugging through it, where there's not really any, whether it's the Raspberry project, the Raspberry Pi project or other things like that. Those are all things that we could kind of put together over time, and eventually it just fills up all the time, like that we have. So we have to be I'm also kind of conscious to how many people are, every time we do something like that, I pay attention to how many people are there and how long they stay and how active they are, and how viable that makes the system. Next question.
This one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, 3210 Studios prominently markets their practical effects and model capabilities. Haven't practical effects become less dominant in the age of CGI?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Less dominant for sure, but still around. Depends on the director. There are a lot of directors that are now moving back to practical effects. Michael Bay likes to blow stuff up, so of course he likes to use practical effects instead of CGI. And even models, I think that didn't they use one modeled spaceship in The Mandalorian that they actually built a model and did motion control camera passes on. So it's not gone completely, and probably 3210 Studios can garner a large percentage of the work, since there's a lot of the model maker companies have gone out of business, since there's not enough work to keep a whole bunch of people in business at the same time.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So there's a series on Netflix that actually talks about the movies that are made. The one thing was Elf was the big thing. They really wanted to do a lot of the claymation, the old style claymation of things. And then of course, if you watch any Jurassic Park stuff, a lot of people are saying that that you need to do close-up stuff out of CGI, and then anything that's going to be full model like dinosaurs and things like that need to be CGI from there. So a little bit of mixture of both. And that works really well.
Go ahead, Noah.
There's still a difference between like visual effects and special effects, right? They're two different departments on a Hollywood set or a film set. I can't talk too much about the details, but on Mandalorian, there's a puppet, right? The main character, and that is largely puppeteers, and there's 4 puppeteers who operate that. You can see that in behind the scenes of that show as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that just look better physically. I think the Mandalorian ship looks better, shot physically than it did, in CG. It's just really hard to get the same detail and get everything just right. I think when we watch a lot of things that are heavy CG, you just get this feeling that it's not quite there. Like it doesn't have a physicalness that you would, get with, and I say this as a CG artist, that's what I do. That's what I did with CG. And I felt like my Queen ship did pretty well. But for the most part, I feel like it's really hard, especially things that are big cities. I find when I see big cityscapes, I have a hard time. Like I just go, they didn't quite turn that corner. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, there's a reason why you feel like it's not really there. And it's because it's not. Kudos, your perception is spot on.
Thanks. I appreciate that. All right. Yeah. And I will say for 3210, once you own the equipment, it's not very expensive to keep a model shop around as long as you're paying rent. You just got to get enough of it to pay the rent that it sits inside of. So it's not like they have a huge staff over there working on it. It's just that they have a model shop available. When you have a big stage right next to a model shop, it's unbelievable, because it means that you're in the stage and you need something and you go over to the model shop and you build it, and then you walk across the parking lot and put it in. So the symbiotic relationship between the 3210 stage and the model shop is really powerful. Like it's the only place I like to do production because you can just build whatever you need to right across the parking lot and walk it over, as opposed to having to like truck it in and figure it out. And you should, it's a thing. Go ahead, Sky.
In Portland is where there's a large on-stage presence of the different, it is claymation in that sense, but that was Will Venton who did a lot of that work. And then the son of the sneaker took that over and really started doing that work. And I got to work on the original stop motion photographer, the guy that did the monsters early days. Anyway, I got to work on it because they had a whole garage full of that equipment of his old maquettes and things. And so it's just a different aesthetic. Right. And it's a lot of fun, but a lot of work.
Yeah. Next question.
Talking about Ray Harryhausen, my hero. Anyway,
that's the one. Thank you.
Yeah. David Brady in New York City says, playback from a Mac through ATEM is considerably darker than that of Roland switchers. Colleagues recommend using a display profile SMPTE RP 431-2-2007 DCI P3. Can anyone comment on the validity of this?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I can't comment on the specific SMPTE color profile, but I can comment on every device having a different gamma setting. It's across monitors. It's across anything that passes video. A lot of people kind of punch up and crush the blacks a little bit just to make the picture look a little bit better. And there's no consistency on that gamma between one device and another. So Yeah, you've pointed out there's a problem. The issue is, will everybody agree and use the same standard to leave the blacks alone?
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
I was going to say, I think passing through the HDMI doesn't necessarily crush the blacks, but I do think we've all concluded that the encoder that pushes it out to USB does crush the blacks through an ATEM mini.
Yeah, and I think that the best way to kind of look at it as far as a profile goes is to build your own profile. So run it through the system, and this gets back into using something like a spider. You can run it through the system and put the spider on the other end of that. So you have the computer running out into the switcher running to another computer, and then put the color correction on top of that, and you should be able to build your own profile that makes it look as accurate as you want it to through that system, and it'll make those adjustments for you. Next question.
Comes in from A. Mitchells in Washington. He says, if interactivity is a key factor for increased audience engagement and engagement is a key factor for developing involvement of new members in a community, how does that community grow at scale if that interactivity might be reduced along the way?
All right, go ahead, Marty.
Well, that's a big hot topic in nonprofit and religious communities. It depends on who is operating the community, who's running the community. We know that some ministers want to turn off their stream altogether and just force people to come into the building, which I think is the wrong way to think about it, especially when you consider that so many more people are exposed and available to your community, to join your community when you're online. And the passive viewing experience versus the engaging viewing experience just makes all of the difference. So I don't think you can really grow your community if you decrease engagement.
I know an organization that was doing some data management of like what happened over the last little bit of time. The online community that they built turned out they weren't paying attention. They were just doing online stuff. Turned out by the end, now that the dust settled, it's 20 times larger than their in-person. 20 times. Not 200%, not 400%, 20 times the size. It is, and 3 or 4 times as much margin. It's like it is like it's over. like just so you know, like that is a hello, it's over. Like this is, if you're pushing people out of your online experience as a community developer, you're basically just setting it up for someone else to take it. People are going to, there'll be a handful of people that still want. I'm not saying that there's not a physical experience, but cutting off the online experience is just setting you up to be run over. It's suicide. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Always be promoting, and I'll give you an example. Yesterday we were in after hours. We were talking to one of the new after hours members, and found out that his wife actually was a teacher, and some of the teaching staff, I think Roscoe was part of that conversation as well. And they said, "Hey, we're feeling a little stagnant in the education hour. Can you bring her in and see if she will want to be part of this panel?" So the word of mouth becomes a big thing, because you never know when the one person comes on and all of a sudden opens up that floodgate.
Yep. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Multi-level marketing, many projects and many pathways. As community grows, you have to break it into smaller and smaller groups and have all kinds of projects going on with various people so that people get to know each other, people stay engaged. They may not know people from another group that's over here, but somebody will. There'll be some cross-pollination, but just a lot of little things going on. It's great.
And you see us doing a lot of that as we are slowly, what's happening on our end is that we are, slowly subdividing. People are doing different things. They're working on these different projects and building those out. And then of course, Discord allows that to happen. And there's little teams building, and you're going to see us continue to do that, where you keep on providing opportunities for people to be involved in different ways. And we'll get more intentional about that as we go into 2021. Next question.
Comes in from Charles Klein in New York City. He says, besides making them yourself, who or where would you go for custom XLR cables, aside from your kids, looking at you, Alex?
The kids are the best. Go ahead, Guy. Small fingers.
Yeah, there's a company that we use. They're called Redco audio cables, and you can go in here and actually choose um, almost everything. So the single channel will say, and then it'll say choose the cable. You can choose, let's say, a quad mic cable. Then you can choose the manufacturer. Let's say we want a Canary. Then we can choose the cable itself. Let's go with that one, 10 feet. And then once you say that, you can then choose the sides. You can actually say, I want XLR straight, and then you can even choose Neutrik, gender, female. And so you can get pretty deep. And so that's $13 for that cable for a 10-footer. So this is who we use, and I'll put the link in the chat.
Go ahead, Marty.
There are companies like True Audio, TREW, who has a couple of offices around the country. Gepco, Rapco, BTX make custom cables. I'll make custom cables if you want to hit me up on Discord. There are a variety of places, but there are, so many companies that where we can source them off the shelf at any length you want. It's pretty easy to get, and they tend to be less expensive that way than custom making them. But there are many options.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
When I'm not making them myself, because I find it very relaxing, I'm buying them from Sweetwater or MarkerTech, and specifically the aforementioned Canary cable, the 4-quad, I think they call it. And of course, you always got to use Neutrik. So those are the two conditions I have for anybody that makes me an XLR.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I really like Mogami and Monoprice cables. The Monoprice, they have a brand new one out called the Monolength, and I put a link in the Mukana show notes. Pretty impressive cable, and I use that for my lead vocal, except it's only got 1 meter or 2 meter versions of the Monolith.
Another one that we've used in the past also is custom cable connection. Is another one to take a look at when you're kind of going through that process. Next question.
Comes in from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. Says, with all the equipment at home, how do you keep dust off your gear?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I use old bed sheets, and I've discovered besides dust, I had another problem depending upon how your HVAC is set up or if you have exhaust fans in your attic. If you cook with olive oil or any other oil, it will precipitate out on keyboards and things, like musical keyboards, anything with a styrene or a certain type of vinyl plastic. It will precipitate that oil out. It'll become gooey and sticky, and the sheets keep the oil from precipitating onto the plastic equipment.
I go to Hosman.
Yeah, I like order and I like cleanliness. So in my office, I have staff, and I had a clean desk policy. So I included them to clean my desk and all my equipment almost every day. And I do that at home. I do dust my desk every day before I sit down in front of the computer, because that just drives me nuts. As soon as I see the monitor at an angle and I see this thick layer of dust. So yeah, that's what I do.
Good, Chris.
Hazmak, I will make a point to never invite you to my house. You'd hate it. I have this laying around all the time. It's great to get in between buttons and to dust in between knobs on a mixer. I used to keep it in my audio kit.
I don't have it within arm's reach, but I have a little vacuum, like a little one that I vacuum things. Like I pull things out, like, oh, I can't quite get to something. I go through little cracks and crevices and vacuum that stuff out. And so I have one that I got specifically just for my cappuccino machine because the burrs, get caught up in cappuccino, but I don't want to use it for anything else because I don't want it to be weird. Anyway, so next question.
This one's from Guy Cochran. He says, what would we do with NFTs?
Go ahead, John.
A couple of interesting things. Now that OpenSea is using Polygon for blockchain, you don't have to pay gas fees anymore, which is huge. So we got to do some new lower Fenwicks with Polygon. But I think you're going to see huge movement on NFTs in the 3D space, especially into the metaverse. So doing NFTs on USDZs might be a cool thing moving forward.
That's what I'm experimenting with that right now. One of the things that I'm thinking about is I've got these African sculptures that I'm going to digitize and then think about how I create them into NFTs, and see if they can't do something. Now, if I make any, I have a policy of not making money in Africa. So if I make any money off the African sculptures, I'll dump it all back into building if any of them do well, it'll become the NFT platform that I'll just invest it. I'll talk to Hosmuk and other people, and we'll build something for African artists. I think that there's a real opportunity for artists to make money in a way that they haven't in the past. I'm primarily interested in 3D. Just exactly what John was talking about. I think that that's going to be, we had done AR or VR 5 years ago that was all building literally virtual museums. And as I was thinking about the NFT, I was like, oh, a virtual museum of stuff that you own, like that's a museum that you could walk through. You could even charge for it. It'd be crazy, weird. Anyway, but it would be like, people could come and see, virtual 3D system, stuff. So anyway, it's interesting. You always have to, with any of these things, you kind of have to think of the angle you're going to take. I can't do what some of the other people are doing, but this would be an angle into this world. And again, we're going to bring some experts onto NFT. We're thinking about doing NFT discussions once a month. So on Mondays, if it gets popular enough, we'll do it once a week, NFT, blockchain, everything, because I think it's something that we need to pay attention to. I think it'll sneak up on us if we're not careful. Go ahead,
So
Courtney.
what is an NFT?
NFT is a non-fungible token. So it's what it means is that we have assigned an authenticity to a digital asset. And that is, so authenticity and originality of a digital asset means that, there's no intrinsic value to a trading card or a sketch by Da Vinci or the Mona Lisa. It's paper and ink. It's the Mona Lisa is worth $1 or $2 of material, right? But because we say that that's original, because we say that that's authentic, and because we say that it's valuable, it's priceless, right? It sits there, and or because a Picasso, we say it is, and people have decided that one, not something that looks like it, not a poster of it, not a replication of it, but that one is a Picasso. It's now $60 million, right? So all we're doing is taking the same concept of taking something essentially worthless and giving it made up value based on a collective decision. We're just giving that to digital as opposed to only physical things. That's what I mean. I'm explaining how I view NFTs from talking to folks that are into NFTs, is that it's not any different than other art that is intrinsically worthless in its physical form, but only valuable because we have agreed that it's valuable. And so NFT is it's a market where we say, I'm going to create something that proves the originality of this piece. And then it's original. It is authentic based on the blockchain, and it attributes value, in that process. And so that's how an NFT kind of works. And I think it's a really interesting business model. The thing that was interesting, I was talking to someone that almost the whole market we don't know this for sure, maybe just all these people who have made all this money with Bitcoin, Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these things. There's a lot of people that have made billions and hundreds of millions and tens of millions of dollars, and they're not interested in paintings. They're interested in something that's more up their alley. So the fact that so the blockchain thing makes sense to them because they've already done well on it, and they're what we would refer to as new money. So they got lots of money rolling around wanting to spend it. And so there's so I don't know how long it'll last. I don't know if it'll last forever. I don't know if it'll last for a year, but I think that at the moment it's a pretty good opportunity for folks. Courtney, did I come to you or did I?
Not yet.
Okay,
but I had a kind of a question as what does it cost to create and register the NFT on the blockchain, and what is the environmental cost of maintaining all those NFTs over a long period of time?
And John, did you want to refer to that?
Yeah, so if you use Ethereum, it's really expensive. The gas fees to put it on the blockchain are expensive. But OpenSea.io is the leader in these marketplaces. So, Courtney, I implore you to go take a look up there. You'll learn it's super easy you create an item, you drag and drop a JPEG or a PNG up there, and then to list it on the blockchain. If you use the Polygon, they won't charge you any money at all. So they're using a different blockchain other than Ethereum, either Bitcoin or Ethereum blockchains to memorialize that item on the blockchain. But they knew that was prohibitive using Ethereum, and so now they're using these third-party blockchains to do the same thing. So I implore you to go check it out. It's pretty simple once you go through the steps.
You go, Jeffrey.
And blockchain, or I'm sorry, NFTs are more than just art, like paintings on the wall and things like that. They're talking about using it for ticketing systems. You can use it in your you can actually create an NFT and say, you want to sponsor my podcast, you want to sponsor the video, you could do that. You could also do a share type system. So like not really a stock market, but more like shares to a specific football team or anything like that. So there's a lot of possibility coming up. We just don't know which direction it can go just yet.
You go, Sky.
Alex, you mentioned about doing a virtual exhibit, and I guess that's where the hybrid concept that the Van Gogh experience is now doing. And so as they are trying to take of the thousands of images that creator created, they've curated down to about 200, and they're creating new experiences. And you do get to take home a piece of the art with you so that you continue to learn about that. So there's an example of trying to do something new.
We're definitely seeing a bunch of our clients are looking at doing NFTs. When you come to an event, they give you an NFT as part of being at that event, and it's not, you're not paying for it. That was the big thing. They were waiting to find a less expensive way to do it. But as part of your ticket, you get it. So like you went to a Taylor Swift show, you get an NFT of a Taylor Swift thing that only the people in the Golden One Center get. It's a graphic with a thing, and it's an NFT, and that's given to you. And it's a collectible like anything else that you would collect that you brought home from a concert. Go ahead, Doug.
I'm still getting my head around this NFT thing, but we were part of an event last week that it was a esports event where they were launching all these games, and you couldn't even pay to get to the event in dollars. You had to use some kind of coin to get to the event. And then inside the games, they were building these worlds where these NFT assets, or you buy a ship or a building or a sword or a hammer or like these crazy things. And it was all about this stuff. And I tell you, the budget for this event was freaking outstanding. Like, there's a lot of money to be made in this world, and I'm still getting my head around what it is, but it was pretty interesting.
I highly recommend that folks watching pay close attention to it. It's not a matter of whether it's going to make money forever. The question is whether it's going to make money today, and whether you can do it at a fairly low lift to be part of the wave, and then either continue to make money with it or not. It shouldn't be something that you extend yourself to a point where you can't do other things, but it's worth dipping your toe in when you can. Go next question.
Coming in from A. Mitchells in Washington, he says, much was said yesterday about the upcoming dramatic increase in viewers, but from a community standpoint, is that really the most important or only number to consider? What are the best metrics to evaluate community health and growth?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Anytime we provide value to a customer, and the customer it could be us, or anything outside. I look at individual growth, and I'm going to quickly use the Santa moments to talk about. Mickey stepped up and helped. So a person came to the forum and said, I'm having sync issues. And Mickey stepped up and worked through all the things, and then put in audio hijack and configured it for him. And he's now in sync. Then the next day he comes back and Chris Fenwick says, hey, hold on a second. Your music's got an issue here. Teaches him about original audio. And then later that night, somebody shows up with a small child and he gives back, and we all get to watch that. And that's the health. When you see that kind of give and take going on, and we're providing value to each other, that's where the health should be measured.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris?
I'll tackle this again from an open source world. That's a world I exist in a lot, where there's a lot of discussion around numbers, because often an initial number is, we've got X GitHub stars or forks, and what does that really mean? And it often doesn't mean very much. And then how you get someone from using that open source tool to asking questions constructively, to answering other people's questions, to fixing problems and contributing back and et cetera, et cetera. And every community handles it slightly differently. But that's usually what those communities are looking at, is how do we get people up from just user to contributor to maybe a maintainer in the long run. But those are not pure numbers. And often high numbers, like high numbers of issues and things, can be a bad sign because it shows no one's really responding to anybody.
Right.
So numbers are hard.
Yeah, I think that I'm not trying to get scale for scale's sake. I definitely have never been a subscriber to, I need 100,000 viewers or 1 million viewers or whatever. What I will say is that the more people that are coming to the office hours, which we're refining into more of a show, you have to remember that what's going to happen here relatively soon is that we're going to not have a webinar format. We're going to have a streaming format, and we want lots of people watching that, because the more people watch that, the more market force we have, which means that we can invite anybody, to come in and be in our second hours. When if you say, hey, can you come talk to my group of 200? There's a certain number of people that will come and do that. If you say, hey, will you come talk to my group of 20,000? There's a different group of people that will come and hang out with you. And so the thing is for us, a lot of viewers of office hours means that it just improves the quality of our piece. Now we're going to continue to be protective of the after hours and the Discord, so that grows. People percolate through that system. There's lots of people watching. Again, tip of the iceberg being office hours, iceberg being after hours and Discord and everything else. We're not trying to grow that bottom part very fast. We're trying to grow the top part relatively quickly so that we have that, because then it also is a good, anything needs continually new nutrients. And for us, that's new people with new expertise, new things that they know, new parts of the world, new approaches, all those things they keep on bringing in every day. In after hours, we see a couple new people that are making a difference, in what we do, that just came out of nowhere and started answering questions. And but we have to keep growing to have those people continue to add to what we're doing, and so, again, I'm not interested in growing all of it really, really fast. In fact, I think that would be detrimental to what we're doing. What I do want to do is continue to use some portion of it to give us more market access, and which is good for all of us, as far as that conversation goes. Next question.
This one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, we talk about sensory-friendly entertainment venues. Could we, as an industry, make a conscious effort to bring those on the autism spectrum into our technical crafts and support them in building their careers?
Go ahead, Marty.
So a while back, I had the opportunity to take a tour of Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., which is a university for the deaf. And the tour was given by one of the architects of the buildings. And I learned so much about how deaf people navigate the world that all of us live in ways that hearing people affect hearing people, but are completely unaware of. Like going down a corridor and turning a corner, sight lines, in a group of people in a settings like a conference room or even a cafeteria. There are so many ways that deaf people navigate the world that are kind of invisible to us deaf people, but certainly have an effect on us. I think it takes advocacy to help the production. It would take advocacy to help the production community learn what we would need to do to help people on the autism spectrum be more engaged and more involved and be able to appreciate and consume what we do as a production community.
Yeah, good. Roscoe, real quick.
Yeah, in the theater world, they're very open to any kind of flashing effects affecting the audience. So they do a lot of warnings and that kind of stuff. But I don't know that it's necessarily open from a production side to the people who might be on the spec.
Next question. We're gonna cut through a couple. We're gonna go just a little over to answer a couple more questions, then we'll move on.
Okay, coming in from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California, says, has anyone tracked the color video effects Zoom adds like contrast, saturation, etc.?
I think most of what Zoom adds is what the HDMI output from whatever the switcher is and so on and so forth. I don't think it adds a lot. to it. We are noticing it adds a little bit of punch to it, a little bit more contrast. But that's all we've seen. But we haven't measured it. And so I notice the way that you can see this is if you open up QuickTime at the same time as Zoom and look at your QuickTime window and your Zoom window, you'll see a difference, and that difference is that piece. Now, the way I've had it in my head to do this for a while. If you really want to see what the delta is, take a camera or take a you record, to the record out of the camera, set a 6K or whatever to a Apple ProRes with a LUT. Have it go out to the switcher, have it go into Zoom, have it also go to QuickTime. Record all three of those and do something where you snap or you do something where you can track it. Then bring them into Final Cut, take your ProRes one and set it at the bottom layer. Take the other ones and set them on top of that, and then set their layer transfer to difference. When you do that, all you're going to see, once you get the frame rates lined up, when you get the frames lined up, all you're going to see is the difference between the ProRes original record and the other thing. This is how we compare and contrast different compression all the time. This is how we measure compression quality, is to take the H.264 or HEVC and put it on top of the original ProRes and then look at it. It'll look all black where it's identical, and then it'll be white. Now, the only thing I'll say about this is this is the red pill. Like, be careful. Like, I'm just going to constantly tell you, like, sometimes you're going to, why didn't I just take the blue pill? The blue pill is not doing what I just said to any footage ever. This is the red pill. And when you put it in, all you can see is compression. Like, all I see when I watch TV on my Apple TV is macro blocks. And I can see when there's bad frames, and I can see all the other stuff. And it's very distracting. So I'm just going to warn you, that is the ultimate way to do it. But it is the red pill. Take with just know that it will ruin your experience of online footage forever. Next question.
Coming in from Chris Zointz in San Antonio, says, as I'm sitting here picking up my studio space, also known as my house, I'm curious, how do you guys organize all your small cables so they aren't piling up?
Super fast. So like 10 seconds each. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. Ore on Amazon makes a 19 slot cable hanger you can mount on the wall. For mobile use, just wrap them up, zip tie them, and put them in zip tie bags.
Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
So you want Velcro zip ties, actually, from Amazon, under, over, and makeup bags if you really need to organize them.
Chris sent me some Velcros, and you can see that I use them really carefully back here. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I just noticed that plastic Sterilite case boxes, for me, they're easy to get. You can get them almost anywhere. And then I put the long cables and then the patch cables into separate boxes. So you just basically lift it up, you look in it, that's the cable I need, open it up and pull it out.
Go ahead, Doug.
I have a bazillion cables. I use a company called Uline, and it's great. They make different size of cases that you can do, and they stack and they fit together. And so whatever size you need, depending on where you're at in your cable wrangling, Uline is a pretty good company.
Go ahead. Best catalog. Anyway, Chris.
Alex, there's no bigger fan of you than me, and it hurts my feelings that you don't fix that cable. So much so, by the way, this drawer unit behind me is actually called the Alex, and I bought it because it's called Alex. That's how much of a fanboy I am of Mr. Lindsay, and I will be building another one of these in my shop. It's from IKEA. I will be building one tomorrow on After Hours.
Okay.
So
I'll work on making this even better.
I don't think you will.
No, when I say better, I mean more messy. All right, look, we're
it's
gonna go
war,
real
Lindsay. It's war.
Yeah, next question. We're going to go real quickly here. I want to close these up. Next question.
Sorry, jumped around here. As these office hours from us, Keenan Campbell in Princeton, Illinois. As these office hours projects continue to grow, could we include a directory of those member events on the Office Hours Global website?
Yeah, we should. Absolutely. And we'll work on that. Next question.
Comes in from Ken English in Buffalo, New York, looking for an HDMI cable guidance. Just got a new ATEM Mini ISO Extreme for our campus recording studio. The remote control of cameras seems like a great feature, I guess she said, but it doesn't work with HDMI Cat 6 extenders, approximately 40 feet from control room to cameras.
Go ahead, Roscoe, real quick.
put a link in for mono price. I've had good luck with the 60s and the 75 footers. Please.
Go ahead, Noah.
I would be looking at HDMI fiber cables.
And I would also, at 40 feet, I would convert them to SDI and then back. With the cheap little the
new Blackmagic converters, yeah.
You have to use the bidirectional.
Bidirectional. This is a bidirectional SDI to HDMI 3G. This is the box, and they're not very expensive, and you just get one on each end. Next question.
Comes in from Marty Passetta Jr. in Los Angeles. He says, good morning. Anyone have a lens that they like a lot that hopefully doesn't break the bank for a Blackmagic 6K Pro with a nice bokeh primary for online meetings? Happy holidays.
Go ahead, TJ.
The Sigma 24 to 70 f2.8 lens. Sigma is currently running a special where you can save $200 on it right now.
Nice. Noah?
I would go with a Rokinon, either 24 or 35 millimeter, because they have a great low f-stop.
There you go. Okay, so now we are changing subjects to talking about shared spaces and co-working spaces. This was a request that came up, and we actually, Rupert is at one of these of shared spaces. Rupert, can you give us a little background of where you're at?
I can. First of all, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. Yeah, so when the second hour suggestion came up, or at least when I saw it on the schedule, I thought, well, it'd be interesting to just get up to date with what the co-working kind of space and industry is doing, at least in my local area. So I just looked up a couple of locations and went to visit one literally yesterday, and got talking to some folks there, and one thing led to another, talking about office hours and so on. And then they told me that one of their other locations has a whole podcasting studio. So one thing led to another, and here I am. So it's in a co-working facility here, actually near to my location, about 10 minutes away. And they have all the usual sort of traditional co-working facilities, shared desks and offices available and meeting spaces. And this studio, which I'm happen to be in, it's one of two. And here I am. So I've just came here with a sort of grab kit. But there's space here for more equipment had I had the time and planning. But it literally came together from about 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that more co-working spaces don't do something like this. Don't actually invest in giving people the ability to broadcast out. I will admit that we tried to get WeWork to do it. We did some presentations for them in 2018. 2019, early 2019, late 2018, and they made some deal with Cheddar, to do something else that was like a broadcast. And I don't think they really understood. I wasn't talking about like, let's do a broadcast like Cheddar or something like that. I was talking about let's do, let everyone at that co-working space have the ability to broadcast out their meetings, to their clients, to their partners, to their, everything else. That's what you really wanted to do. And I think that, I think it's genius what can you tell us what the company is that you're working with?
Sure. So this particular group is called Common Desk, and they have a number of locations all kind of spread over. There's a number here in the Dallas metro area, but they have plenty of other locations as well, and opening new locations, it seems.
Are they putting these studios everywhere on all of their locations?
I don't think they have them at all of them at the moment, but
Right.
this is certainly one of the showcase locations
Right.
for that. And it's all about seeing what the use cases are and what the what the uptake is. But they're certainly going after the opportunity.
Absolutely. Very cool. Let's go ahead and I've got a couple questions stacking up. So if you've got questions or comments, go ahead and throw them into Makana. Go ahead. Next question.
All righty. Coming in from Christian Turi in London, UK. So clearly the majority of people prefer to work from home full-time or hybrid, but not all employers or employees like that. Do you think there will be a break at some point where some companies only look for non-remote employees?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
It totally depends on the size of the company and the function of what that company does. I mean, there are some jobs in larger companies. It's great to send, they have a central office. So they're not local to where the business is being done or the cars being manufactured or that kind of stuff. A lot of the larger the company, the more centralized stuff goes. And then therefore it's a lot easier to take it out of being local and put it into a home or let somebody work from home. So I think the type of work obviously matters. And then the size of the company is going to matter. So
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, just a little background. I started the second co-working space in Austin about a decade ago, and we hosted Leo Laporte at South by Southwest. So I kind of tried way back then to do what Rupert's saying. Now on to this question. I think as co-working spaces and coffee shops adapt more and more, employers are going to want to utilize these spaces more and more. So I don't see a total reversal going back to in office. I really don't see it.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think companies are going to have to be, flexible and also, sensitive to not wanting to discriminate against any set of circumstances, but at the same time having to make, commercial decisions that make sense for their business. But and a lot of people are working at home, but it clearly maybe doesn't suit everybody, or just maybe not everybody is able to, either has the space or the circumstances to work at home. And some people, I guess, do need a place to work if it isn't a office.
Yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and Christian, as to your question, I think a lot of employees will be looking, their point of view will be looking for people that are not remote. But I think if you're someone that's forward thinking, you can bring up the benefits of why you could do your job remotely, if that is possible.
Go ahead, Marty.
So from a personal and productive standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for many industries to have people working at home. From a corporate financial standpoint, what are they going to do with all this excess office space that they're paying rent for? And on a larger scale, for the city, county, state economy to have all this excess office space available that's not being used is not a really good thing. Now, I've seen recently where there are communities that are actively converting office space now into residential space.
Well, and I also think that there's an opportunity there to give better offices to the people who do want to come in, so that you have a percentage of people who don't want to come in or don't want a full-time office. But, there's a company that just built a new studio, a new office building that was really big. And there was a huge push and pull to stay in the old offices. Like all the teams that had leverage wanted to stay in the old offices because they had offices. They had rooms for each person, and they didn't want to go to the shared space, that was there. And so it, it was, and one was a lot shinier than the other one, and it just didn't matter because they wanted to, they wanted the privacy. And so I think that going back and the real estate doesn't make sense in the sense that, we have all this open space because we had this open office. Well, part of the reason that people don't want to come back is because of the open office. It was a horrible idea. Like it was, it only made sense to people who were paying for it. And so like for people who are in it, I mean, I worked in a lot of different companies, and it was just always people just rolling their eyes at like these idiot architects and idiot managers who thought this was a good idea. I mean, it was just constant. It was like this constant, just, people just, and they just went, well, that's my job and I have to go to this thing. Now it's not. And they don't want to go back. And that's a big problem that they have, is no one wants to go back to an open office. And so what you could do is get rid of the open offices. You would need all that extra real estate to give everybody their own office instead of packing them in like cattle. Go ahead, Noah.
It's interesting if you think back to like the early first days, March 2020-ish timeframe of like the refrain that was happening, like people not wanting to make the online transition and being hesitant. And then obviously we were thrown in the deep end. People started getting comfortable from working from home. And so I think now we're at a point where people are having to decide like what they prefer. But the reality, I think, is people all have different preferences, right? Alex absolutely hates that co-working space, like open office space is the term, right? Whereas some people might absolutely love that. Some people absolutely.
I've never met people who put up with it. I've never met anyone who loves an open office space.
Okay. Yeah.
That works there.
Yeah, and I guess from the corporate meetings that I've heard and helped facilitate, the majority of them have decided to give people the choice, and so hopefully there is that choice for us in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris.
Yeah, I agree with your sentiment, Alex. I think as an editor, I've always had, my own room because noise, etc. And it's shocking to me that people, when I've had to be in it's so distracting, so horrible. I can't imagine it. I also think that it's very possible that we are in a transitionary time, and it's going to be a slow transition because it involves real estate. Real estate likes to go up. It never likes to go down. It likes to grow. It doesn't like to shrink. And I think that it's unfortunate that some really big companies, especially here in the Bay Area, have just finished building these giant buildings. You got the Salesforce nose hair trimmer down there at South Market.
That's not what I called it, but when they were building it, it had two big cranes, and it so looked like the eye from Sauron. Like there was like these when the sun was in just the right place. Anyway, so
bad reference.
You obviously don't watch The Lord of the Rings.
No, I don't. And then you got the spaceship down there in Cupertino. But I think that it's very possible that we're going to see a big change. What matters most to people like us, who I never want to work anyplace else again, is that we make our accessibility, we make our performance, we make our productivity superior, make it better.
Right.
And I think when we do that, it'll grease the wheels, if you will, to make it easier to say, yeah, actually, this is working fine. We'll just do this.
And go, Rupert.
I think from a real estate angle, the co-working model is actually quite attractive because it spreads the risk a little bit. You're not you're dividing up your square footage and diversifying your exposure rather than having, if you're a landlord, having a small number of large tenants might be a bit risky. So having some co-working space is, I think, attractive. Maybe that might be helpful to define the terminology, because I don't think co-working, at least to me, has never meant all open plan offices. Certainly in terms of this facility and others that I've visited either recently or over time, there's plenty of options. There is open plan space if that's what you want. You can be a member and have an open desk and come and go, or there's private offices you can lease, or there's meeting rooms of almost any size to book out. And then so the key thing is flexibility and options, and I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, Marty, you have an open mic. I've thought about this a little bit. So one thing you want to think about is how much time we wasted. You're basically paying for real estate that you're only using 8 or 10 hours a day. If you built, I know this will sound crazy right now, but it'll sound less crazy in a decade. But we had a team in Pixel Core 20 years ago that was kind of playing with this idea. It would make more sense for a company, an information company, to have people on a campus, but that's where they live, like it's an apartment. And it would make sense for the company to actually pay for the person's apartment to live in that space, but having fiber with high quality, really high quality video, where every apartment has an office built into it that is all tied in, that's going to get super high quality video and transfer, and a 10 gig connection to the main hub, with shared spaces in the middle, in office buildings that are part of that community, but it's not one company. It'd be 10 companies or 20 companies or 100 companies that are all information companies, that their workers don't have to live there, but that would be an opportunity for them. And then you could build an entirely different kind of metropolis that is all based around that, where you still have the advantages that people can get into a physical space together at will, but also can just go home and work at home, essentially, through that process. It's not really a company town, because it would be lots of companies. It would just be a community, but it would be a community for the information age, not for, light, light or heavy industry. And you wouldn't be able to do it unless you had municipal power to build the city. And the only place in the world that you can do that right now is Nevada. Right. Next question.
All righty. Coming in from our own Sky Gleason, says, let me try and untangle this. Whenever you are working for a business, How can you evaluate productivity to support the job you were there to do?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, Alex, I think you narrowed it down in the concept of in the information age. If your product is information, a lot of this conversation is very good. But the point that my friend at Microsoft says, if you're going to be employed by Microsoft, we're not there for you. You are there to support and move our product forward. So that's where I guess I'm asking, what productivities are we talking about in the product or service? I guess you're narrowing it down to either the content creation or information business.
There's a saying that I think is applicable here is do not mistake movement for progress. And the tracking of hours and time that people are in is movement. It does not define progress. Rupert?
In the information space, let's take some easy examples like software development. Almost all productivity in software development is tracked in feature requests and development and bug reports and tickets and all those things which ultimately go into some kind of database or information system ERP, and a lot of reporting is generated out of that. So there's that side of it, and there's probably some AI stuff coming down the pipe. But I think a lot of technologies coming out there for helping managers and employers doing that, analyzing that kind of performance for remote staff. But also, as when some people do get back into the office or an office environment, there's also going to be some interesting technology coming down the pipe of how to analyze some of that behavior too.
I mean, I can tell you that as someone who's had a company and had a bunch of employees and a lot of them distributed all over, I never tracked anybody's hours. I didn't care as long as they were getting done what I needed them to get done, and that they were available in a certain time window. So, between, let's say 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., if I send someone an email or a text, I expect to get it back quickly. If they're working for me, relatively quickly, I expect it to come back within a couple minutes. If I need to get into a meeting or we need to talk about something, people that would tell me at 3:00 in the afternoon that they're going to run an errand, personal errand, that was more, if it happened often, that would become problematic. That was, that didn't really work in the middle of what we decided is the workday. Now, if we're busy, and for a lot of us, we were doing personal things in the middle of the day, but then working into the night. So just that, as long as I knew what that schedule was and it made sense, then, and people were in communication, it didn't matter to me as long as they got done what they needed to get done. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, of course, just plus one to what everyone said. Deliverables, of course, is something, if it's that obvious. Sometimes it's not that obvious. Might this be an opportunity that you can pre-negotiate just what progress is and what's expected? Sort of taking the default lazy way of saying, I've been in this building for so many hours.
Yeah, it's when you really think about managing people and deciding their value by how much time because if you ever worked in one of these offices, you realize how little they get done in a given day. They're all sitting around talking to each other and BSing, and then there's long lunches, and then there's these other things, and there's companies that pay attention to that, and everyone gets in at a certain time. They get in and they just move their hours along, and so I don't think that necessarily is a great tool. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I always thought you measure productivity by the number of products produced, whether that product is a widget or a sales report or a spreadsheet, right. That relates to the company. If you're doing accounting, you have to finish the accounting. So tasks are handed out, and those tasks have to be completed by a certain deadline. And if they're not, then your productivity has gone down, whether the person is sitting in a cubicle or sitting at home. So I think it's easy to measure productivity in that respect.
And I think the hard part is also that people get caught up in doing. And, a lot of my stuff is all done by me idling and thinking. I just have to think for a little while. I need to space out a little while. I need to do whatever. And then I come back and I do a whole lot at one time, as opposed to, this kind of constant tension of trying to get things done. Next question.
Coming in from Sky Gleason says, from Seattle, Washington, would you pay for a class from an acting coach to help you give better on-camera presentations? Would you take the class if your company paid for it?
Go ahead, Paul.
No, because I'm a member of Office Hours. I'm sure I could find someone here that I could say, "Hey, Josh, would you mind giving me a few tips on how to present myself better?" And he'd probably help me out, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you, Josh?
Go ahead, Noah.
I think if just from my development and experience 5 years ago, I probably would have said no. Today, I definitely would say yes. You're hiring somebody with more experience than you to give you personal coaching on something. Of course, like watching videos and learning from YouTube, I think would also be something I would be doing as well.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm not sure I'd go instantly to an acting, source of training. There's certainly value in some training on presentation skills and camera skills and that kind of thing. And I certainly think that some diligent employers will, help guide some of their staff and teams through that. But I'm not so sure it'll be on an acting kind of angle.
Good, Sky.
No, I'm not asking for myself, but I do have a friend in San Francisco, and she is turning her acting class and teaching and coaching into this new model, and she's doing quite well because people are recognizing this is a new, just like when you're the whole concept of what colors do you look best in, what presentations are you giving, that coaching is a concept. And so I guess I'm asking for a friend.
I will say that we worked with a company for a long time. Anybody that was publicly facing, like allowed to talk on stage, was getting 2 to 3 hours of training a week, all year round. Just 2 to 3 hours of training on their presentations every week. And they got ground up. You could watch them because you could watch them through their development. There'd be a point where they were so broken from the feedback that they were questioning themselves on stage. They were hard. They couldn't figure out how to say things. There's always this like brokenness when someone gets trained because they're suddenly conscious to all the things they're not doing well. And then they would slowly come out of that. And then they're like a different person. Like, they're just like when you see a dancer that's been trained, it's different than a dancer who's just having fun. That comes from an enormous amount of training, and practice. And the way that they move their, arms and legs and everything else is in their body is from training and practice, not from they just did it on their own, and so you see that in presenters when they're given that much feedback. But they do go through it's kind of like someone trying to rebuild their golf swing. There's some ugliness for a while as they figure it out. Go ahead, Lois.
And I see that question as two parts, and I'm not answering for personally, but would someone pay for class? And I think it depends on whether you are doing this because it's you want to become an actor. Yes, sure. You are on Zoom and you are forced to be here and there's, whatever. Probably not. Would you take the class if your company paid for it? Depends on whether or not your company required you to take the class. So I think that the answers to these questions are very variable depending upon the situation. And most of you, I think, are talking about professionals in a business situation. But if you're talking about people who are doing Zoom classes and things, they might or they might not. It depends on your personal confidence, I think.
I think the only thing I'll say is that, that it is, to get things done takes a certain level of expertise and a certain level of ability. And, it is something that you can do on your own. It just takes a while to figure that out. There's people that can short circuit that and give you a lot more, and your ability to present and your ability to connect with the folks that you're talking to and your ability to build presentations has a huge impact on your professional trajectory and what you get done. I have done a lot of crazy things that are largely based on my ability to present a keynote document, like build and present a keynote document. And when I say that, not for me, it's not that I personally made the money, but the company that I owned probably generated $20 or $30 million just from my ability to build keynotes, and present them online. So I think that it is a skill that's worth learning. And if you feel like you're not, it's something you can always get better at. I would say that I'm at about 20% my capacity, of what I'm doing right now. And it's pretty useful. Next question.
All right. Coming in from Eric Fred Eric Eckhart in Bad Herrenalb, Germany, says, like hybrid events, hybrid business meetings are not a pleasure to participate. What will the future of business meetings look like?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, they'll probably be, instead of hybrid, they'll be all remote because I think with a hybrid, somebody gets ignored in a hybrid meeting where there's people in the room and there's somebody on a screen somewhere. And typically the person on the screen has a hard time getting recognized, or they feel that they're ignored. I think they'll go to, everybody's going to be working from their individual office if they're at an office, or at home if they're working from home, on a Zoom meeting. And that way everyone seems included, everyone gets looked at the same, and everyone's treated the same.
To your point, I really think that if companies built the next generation of office that's maybe a 10 by 10 cubicle or a 15 by 15 and built it out that it looked gorgeous and it was your set and it had a camera that you could be on virtual meetings all the time, a lot more people will want to go back to work because they don't want to build that for their house. Go ahead, Paul.
And the donuts and coffee aren't as good at home.
Yeah. Except for mine.
Okay. Hey, you can have hybrid meetings, but the focus has to be on the Zoom meeting, on the virtual meeting, and you can have several participants in the Zoom meeting be in the meeting remotely.
You're getting attacked there. Yeah. Next question. Oh, no, sorry, not next question, Guy.
Yeah, so some of us were pretty shocked when we were watching the Microsoft Ignite session, and we saw this as the future, because as you go into it, some of these avatars this is Microsoft Teams, have no legs. So the chat just went bananas. There was thousands of people in there, and they're like, "This is the future. Like this is how we're going to meet around some of these are pretty cool, like drawing on a large board and moving a sticky around, but some of it's just weird.
It's going to be weird for quite some time, because capturing the level of data. And if Zoom didn't exist, if Zoom wasn't hadn't been around, this kind of stuff would probably be more popular. But when we figure out how to just get better cameras, turns out that it's better than having it in 3D. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I think, the word hybrid is it's almost meaningless now, because it's either got so many different, reputations or assumptions that really doesn't tell anybody a whole lot. The words I'm seeing more coming around the corner is distributed. The workforce is distributed. The meetings are distributed. It may be all over the place, all over the world, in all different types of environments. And so, some of these things aren't a pleasure right now because the technology hasn't been utilized or yet figured out, but it's a journey, and we're on it.
I think one of the things when it comes back to shared spaces that I think is interesting is where I think that individual offices that you don't have to have a whole company. That's where some of these shared spaces work, but you're not riding a desk that other people are using. You're renting out a small office that is then designed for that. And one of the problems we had with a lot of shared spaces that we worked with was low bandwidth. They didn't have enough bandwidth to support the whole building doing what it needs to do. Josh?
Yeah, I think the difference with a business is that you have more resources in a business. So potentially they could invest more to advance things forward. But the lure to go to hybrid, I think, is pulling back towards the physical, where they have to deal with physical things. But a business being able to push the boundaries, they might be able to get something like USDZs to look at physical objects or more advanced ways of making it work. And usually it's typically the rest of the mainstream follows the investment in the original entrepreneurship that businesses have. So it'd be very interesting to see what they do. Not everything's going to stick. Not everything's going to be great, but I think there will be some innovation in this front.
I think the vast majority of offices that could go, they still say, "Oh, you have to come back." They're pitching ideas. They don't need to come back. They just have managers and executives that are old thinking. Next question.
Comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, could you see a model similar to 3210 Studios, and he has a link there, where companies in a common industry share workspace and resources being marketable internationally?
Go to Roscoe.
Yeah, I think this is unique to production. The example you give is a production example, and production is kind of unique in the sense that it can go to a location and it has specific needs. A sound stage, for example, is a specific need, but it's always changing what's going on inside of it. But there are locations, Los Angeles, Toronto, Albuquerque, have sound stages. Whereas paint, I'm thinking of, where you paint cars or something. Sure, that could have different cars coming through all the time, but I don't think you're going to see it in a shared environment.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it depends, but I doubt it because companies are so paranoid about their company secrets and a shared space. If they're competitors, they're not going to want to share a space with one of their competitors for fear of losing employees or losing company trade secrets, etc.
You can actually build whole cities around a common thing. One that's probably pretty popular that you've heard about in the past is called Shenzhen. It is a entire world developed around the manufacture of electronic goods. And there are more precision machinists in that one city than there are in the entire United States. Like it is, and we see this happen in a lot of different places. Like I can't remember exactly what the city is, but there's a place because what happens is all the components and all the talent ends up in one place. And that's why we can't pull stuff manufacturing out of China, is because they have cities like that have all of the talent, all the pieces, everything's all there. Another place that you want to look at that's similar to that is places like Akihabara I may not be pronouncing that correctly, but in Japan, where there's all this electronic stuff that you'd think that everyone's competing, but they all need those common resources, and having them all in one place allows them to leverage all of that. Hard drives are all made in one town, one city, like a lot of them are. And so when we have floods, we have a big problem with that. This kind of stuff happens a lot. 3210, that's the space that we're in, is pretty useful. You have lots of other people around that you can hire to do different things. And you all have access. We don't all need the stage at one time, but we do need it. And when we need it, it's great to have that. We don't all need the model shop at one time, but having that access allows us to bid on things that we couldn't do otherwise. So it's pretty useful. Next question.
From Hosmuk in Cape Town. I have not seen Rupert outside his usual location when he is in office hours or after hours. Now that we know he is working from an office, he looks dapper with a jacket. Can Rupert explain why he felt he has to don a jacket?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm more concerned about why I felt I haven't had to wear a jacket for 2 years at home. But the couple of reasons, I guess. I was trying to travel light, so this was just a quick win after setting up here, and I knew I couldn't get everything else sort of perfect in the way I wanted it. So it was just a way of brightening up the thing. But also, office to me is working environment. Just keep it professional.
Next question.
Another question for Rupert from Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina says, what did Rupert bring and what does the podcasting space provide?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So this really did come together pretty quick, like I mentioned. So I'd love to have brought more, and probably haven't used everything that I have brought. But ultimately, I brought my my laptop, my Brio, a light, Ethernet. I'm using one of their microphones, but my own interface. But the space here it was intended as a podcasting space, so it's very audio orientated, which is good. It's an acoustically treated space. They've got 4 microphones for headphones interface, all that kind of stuff. Big screen here. So they're not providing camera equipment here, but I guess that could easily be added and put into the mix. And they have, like I said before, they have 2 rooms and they're basically twins with a common control room in the middle, which is ready for whatever equipment you wanted to put in there.
Go ahead, Chris.
Rupert, was it difficult getting time? Is a loaded question. Was it difficult reserving time in the podcast studio?
It wasn't for the time that I wanted, which it just literally came about yesterday. So it wasn't in use at this time. There just hasn't been time yet to explore, their availability on their wider schedule, but I can look into that.
Right. And to be clear, because we saw you when you were testing the room yesterday, the room you're in is actually, it's a medium-sized room, big table. It's like kind of like a Joe Rogan, a bunch of people around a table with a bunch of mic booms, so you look cool, right?
Right. Given more time, I'd have set up a wide shot. Yeah, but it's 12 by 18, something like that space with a table. Yeah.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it seems well lit. However, the background is very, very noisy. I'm wondering, A, is the background lit? And B, what kind of bandwidth do they provide you with? You seem a little more noisy, even though you're using your same camera as your regular setup at home.
So I have my same camera, but not my same lights. So this is, they've got these big ceiling lights shining down, which is just a bit bright. And this is a very black background. So I'd have brought, more time, I'd have brought more color in and stuff and just bigger lights. But it's, it is obviously, its initial design was probably more on the audio side. So it sounds very nice in here. Obviously just visually that's picking up a bit of noise without the light that, I'd ultimately like to bring in here.
And are you getting a full 1080p bandwidth up?
Yep, I've got wired Ethernet.
Go ahead, Sky, real quick.
So yes, it does sound like it was designed by an audio engineer versus a video engineer. And I guess the other aesthetics around, before you get into that office space, I assume it has all the other nice, kitchen area and the bathrooms and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, absolutely. I guess. Yeah, it's a very well equipped facility from that point of view, and they have an espresso machine, so that's good.
That's great.
What else do you need?
Yeah, exactly.
This question comes in from Ray Harwood in Avondale, Arizona. Says 2 new spaces in the Phoenix area with only podcast booths, but no video. Is there an opportunity in this situation for local office hours folks to co-opt some space, either inside or nearby? And he puts a link to workuity.com.
Go ahead, Noah.
I think there's plenty of opportunity to set up these kind of podcast booths and that kind of thing. But the one great thing about office hours is we can leverage and learn from each other, essentially, right? And so we multiply each other and can shortcut that learning process. Instead of doing, a bunch of individual studios, we could collaborate together on something that works.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Rupert.
I think from a sort of service provider point of view, it's going to take some partnerships, really, because I don't think one kind of person can do it all until you get to kind of critical mass. I mean, if there was a bunch of camera equipment in here, then they'd need either, somebody on staff to run it or a cloud, they'd need some kind of infrastructure to be able to support that and operate that, which isn't impossible, but you need to get to a certain, throughput to be able to make that viable. But I think they're using this as an example, it's a solid foundation here. Got an acoustically isolated space, good bandwidth, good facilities outside. All kinds of there's the building blocks of something. For sure.
Next question.
And a quick announcement: those of you still entering questions in the voting, make sure you tag your question "future co-working" so we can include them in this hour if you haven't already done so. All right, the next question comes in from Noah Sargent. We just heard from a question for Rupert. Rupert, do you get the impression that the streaming media podcast room is being booked a lot? Do they charge extra to use that space?
It is a premium space. There's have the option to book all kinds of facilities here and at other locations, conference rooms or spaces. But these podcast rooms are a specific category in that offering. Again, it's all happened very quickly, but the people I've spoken to definitely tell me anecdotes of things that have been done here and uses that have been made, but the exact utilization, I couldn't speak to that right now.
Next question.
Another one comes in from Noah Sargent in Fullerton. Says, if we were to design and build a city from the ground up to leverage future tech, what would that look like?
I go ahead, Roscoe.
Noah's sitting in that city, which is kind of interesting. Fullerton is going to have 1 gig fiber up and down to every household in the city for $60 a month from 2 different ISP providers. So that would be number 1 in my book. After that, you kind of have to look at Walt Disney's dream for Epcot and how that whole circle thing, his original dream on those maps are kind of interesting, but I don't know exactly what it would build.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, Forbes said Austin is the number 1 city of the future. Why did they say that? Well, the rapid growth of 5G, the fiber, the history of Austin, the food scene, the music scene. and all that is contributing. And then we've got one huge 900-pound elephant in the room. His name is Elon Musk, and he's building tunnels under existing roads 6 miles from where I live out here in the country outside of Austin is the Boring Company. That's going to revolutionize cities.
Go ahead, Josh.
I think no is a trick question. The city, I think, looks like fiber optics to people's homes to utilize the tech. Sure, there are certain spaces, I think, that that would utilize that. So maybe just centered around work areas where you would have to collaborate. But I think the infrastructure will be in the virtual.
In a very short period of time, we could probably do a whole second hour. I know I could talk for a whole hour about it. I think about it a lot. It's like it's a lot of what I think about when I'm fiddling about. So I got into this in the late 90s, studying Paolo Soleri's arcology concept. So that's kind of where I kind of lean towards as I think about ideas around that. But I think some of the things, the city of the future, I think and someone will build it. I mean, it's coming closer to the surface now. You can hear people talk about those things. 20 years ago, it sounded like a complete insanity. But no cars. Cars are on the outside, not on the inside. You have people movers underground. You put all of that stuff underground. You don't need to have them do those things. You don't have any houses. You have large complexes. Houses are not efficient. It creates too much of a need for a car. You can pack an enormous number of people into large things, and I've got a bunch of ideas about what that would look like. The idea, though, is that you have most of what you need on the inside of those complexes is all the stuff you'd buy, like a market and everything else, but everything else is delivered to you through a very high-tech dumbwaiter system, that I think you could do there. And then everything is within walking, but when it's outside, it is relatively quiet because you wouldn't have any cars. I'd put it I put it near a Hyperloop, and I'd put all the cities on Hyperloops. So basically they just sit on that. What you could also do is enclose the cities and make them basically a secure location. So basically it's like going into the airport to go into the city. And theoretically, if you did it right, the Hyperloops could be part of that sterile environment. So there's a whole lot of things that you could do that were really interesting in that sense. And as we deal with the issues that we're having right now, as well as asymmetrical threats, they could be pretty useful. So I think that the technology, when Disney thought of it or when Paolo Soleri thought of it, just wasn't there. It's there now. So I think that we're going to start seeing it. And again, you need to make the investment, you need control over the municipality rules. And the only place that's doing that right now is, again, Nevada. And you're starting to see some serious thinking about it in Reno. Next question.
Comes in from Guy Cochran in Seattle. Says, can Rupert log in with his phone to give us a behind-the-scenes tour? Maybe just could turn that camera around.
Rupert, do you have ability to show it to us relatively easily?
I do. I just wouldn't want to overlap with any of their existing sort of promotional material online. It is they do have information online, and I will say that where what I'm seeing here is that's accurately described and shown online with on there. I can provide some links to that.
If he adds the camera, it'll also break 2.0. So we have to figure that out with 2.0. Adding another participant is something that's harder for us to do in office hours at the moment. And next question.
Comes in from Jay Snyder in Reno, Nevada. Says, what's your best 10% tip for corporate meetings? Something free and easy that will make your hybrid or online meetings 10% better. Both for small meetings from 5 to 10 participants and large events, 100 to 1,000.
Good guy.
I would say to run a test beforehand and see and hear what you sound like from where you were. So have somebody just talk at your spot and then go listen on the other side or record it and see what that sounds like. You'll find that you might need an Ethernet cable or a better microphone or more lights or a better camera. So we'll nitpick at everything. If you throw it over to us, we'll tell you what you need.
Go ahead, Noah.
There's a clear difference to me with companies that rehearse and companies that don't. And just to see the difference of doing it once over, going through run a show, anything like that, huge difference.
I guess the two things I would say is, number one is conference rooms are horrible. Like it's just a pain point for all of us when you do any hybrid, especially when you're doing it without the professional tools that you need to do it. You're just inflicting pain on everybody that's on the remote end. I really think that people should just come in like this. We have head to head, head and shoulder view of each other, I find that to be much better than having to deal with going into a conference room even. And definitely, I don't want to deal with actually having a conference room join what I'm doing. That's a disaster almost all the time. And I'm talking about big companies, billion-dollar companies with conference rooms that are unlistenable and almost unviewable and demoralizing just to be in the meeting. So, and they have theoretically no limit to how much they could spend on that, but they've somehow limited it to making it look pretty and being totally unusable. So the first thing I would do is let everyone come in from home or their office in a way that was there and give them relatively a good way to do that. Next question.
Comes in from John Barker in Malmo, Sweden. Question for Alex. He says, what equipment, audio and video, did you have in mind for the WeWork setups? And what gear would you use if you were to do it now?
It'd be similar. The big thing with the WeWork setups that we were recommending was point to point, so that no people talking to each other in the room. Really, it was designed for one person to project to other people or to join larger studios that we were designing at the time. So the idea is that you can interconnect people, but it's all it's what we're doing here, right? I mean, that's what we were proposing, is that's the way to do that. And person might have a telestrator in front of them, so they might have a Wacom tablet with a Mac Mini that runs that with a switcher. At the time, it was bigger switchers. We didn't have these little switchers when we were proposing these things, but every piece of equipment is remote controlled. So the idea is that you have a tech person on staff that can help you with those things, but the person could either run it themselves or someone could run it remotely, but you would never have any component that couldn't be touched remotely, so that if you need to fix something, it can be largely fixed. And if it's something that's just connection issue, you have a technical person that's there to do that. And so those are the big things that we would look at. But single camera, teleprompter, with a telestrator, good lighting, all DMX controlled, audio. And a lot of it was actually based on tours I did of Bloomberg. Bloomberg runs their Hong Kong out of, they have one tech person, they run it out of London 10 years ago. And they everything from the mics to everything else is all controlled from the London office. And so that's where it's sunk in that you could do this. And I've thought about it since I saw that, because it was absolute, all fully controlled that way. Canada has another system like that as well for smaller towns doing their own local broadcasts. The broadcaster sits in there and does it in front of a green screen, and it's all run out of Vancouver and then broadcasted back to the local municipality. But it's cheaper than having a whole staff in the smaller municipalities. They just have one tech person that just kind of makes it work. Next question.
Coming in from Ken English in Buffalo, New York. New York. We're building engagement, replacing face-to-face eye contact in meetings. Do you use teleprompters or special camera setups, or just have good eye discipline?
Go ahead, Rupert.
All of those things, just depending on the circumstances. Ideally, it'd be at my home setup using my teleprompter, but sometimes you've got to be in a different set of circumstances with different equipment. So, I mean, I think that, getting your screen up high, and if you're using using an external camera, getting it as close to the screen as possible, and then using some discipline, which is what I'm doing right now.
Go ahead, Sky.
Early days of COVID, it was a conversation between two people, and that's the discipline of looking at that camera, thinking that I'm going to be looking at your eyes. And yes, it is a discipline on my part, because I'm a guy that wants to see shiny things in myself, and so it is a discipline in many ways, unless you do have that Teratron and Aaron Sorkin?
Not Aaron Sorkin.
No, sorry.
Yeah. Errol Morris. So yeah. I think that you definitely want to build that up. A teleprompter definitely makes it easier to keep that eye contact, but otherwise keeping the camera right as close to what you're doing as possible makes a big difference. Next question.
Coming in from Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia. She says, how can bandwidth issues at a co-working space be solved if the existing internet companies, who will not be named, say that you're at the limit? Who do you go to?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So I know some co-working spaces can be in some more sort of esoteric locations, but if you're talking about space in a corporate real estate building, there aren't many of those that won't have decent fiber connectivity at least available. What they're paying for might be a different question, but mostly there's good bandwidth available options available to the building. What the space chooses to do with it, is kind of up to them. And then the challenges can come if you have everybody trying to use Wi-Fi. I know it seems cool, but it's not good news from a bandwidth point of view. So those spaces need to, commit to getting the fiber if it's available, and it comes at a cost. You need that bandwidth, and then distributing it diligently with Ethernet rather than just having all these people on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, go, Josh.
Yeah, I have the feeling that internet bandwidth is going to be sort of the next thing, where we thought we had enough storage space before, and it would be ludicrous to have any more. I think the parallelism could increase, but also as it becomes more of a thing to have commuting out, once you've put in enough pipes, you could also be a little more intelligent about how you use that bandwidth. For example, using on-premise solutions or using reflectors that wouldn't have to send individual pipes out if you're having a conference call with other people. I think some smarter utilization, just like Zoom does, to make sure that it's not sending data that it doesn't need to, places where it doesn't have to.
Yeah, I think that most places can get more. When they say that they can't, it means that they're not willing to spend what it takes to do it. We've put a gigabit connection into almost many parts of the world. It's possible, just depends on how much costs. Next question.
Coming in from Lois Richter in Davis, California. She says, what might be the difference with a rental space versus a group making their own shared space?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I'm going to go back to Little House on the Prairie. On the weekends, it was the church, and during the week, it was a schoolhouse. And so shared of limited resources is probably the best answer.
The biggest difference, I think, is also just managing all the various needs that people have. When you have someone who owns it, they set up the rules. If you're going to come in together, it's easy to start it informally, and then it becomes a mess. So you just have to make sure that there's clear, defined rules about how that's going to work. Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, he says, why is Rupert so washed out versus his usual camera?
Real quick, Rupert, I don't think it's washed out. It's interesting.
Just a mixture of trying to use these house lights and not having the time to bring my own lights, and having to put on the jacket instead.
Right. Next question.
From Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. What would entice employees to use a co-working space or company office?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I live near Los Angeles. Commuting is a huge issue.
Yeah. Having it close by, and also having things that you can't get at home. Like, you just have to have something that people feel like they can't get at home. And I don't think the offices are providing that. They're providing less than what they can get at home. Next question.
Coming in from Christian Turi in London, UK. Isn't After Hours a hybrid open office 2.0?
Yeah, I think I would call it an Uber office. It is the ultimate open office, but you have control. What we bring in after hours is that you can listen, you can talk, you can turn it off, you can walk away, you can come back. All the things that you don't get in a normal open office. It's in my opinion, the next gen of that idea is kind of the ultimate open office. Next question.
Looks like the last question for the day comes in from George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The proponents of back to the office or hybrid talk about the importance of collaboration. In my experience, collaboration in real time may be necessary, but is actually a small part of the working hours. Your thoughts?
Let's do it really quickly. Go ahead, Noah.
I think virtual components are going to get better and better at this over time. Right now, there's still a need for that in-person collaboration sometimes, but it's not as frequent.
I'm going to say follow the money. Look who's saying this. It's probably the people that own the real estate.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
I think collaboration is best done face-to-face. And I can honestly say I have very rarely had as good a face-to-face experience than we are having right now. I can see you all clearly. Hopefully you can see me, maybe not ideally, but had we been in a room altogether, we would not have been able to see each other as clearly. We'd all be bending our necks and doing all kinds of things to understand what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Lois, real quick.
Breakout rooms.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Thanks to everybody. I have a hard out that I have to jump to another meeting. And so needless to say, I started to make things go quickly. But thanks to our producers for all the great questions and great discussion. And thanks to the panelists. It was a very popular day today. We had a lot of people here for this conversation. So both in the producer realm as well as the panelist realm. So thanks so much for being part of this. And remember that tomorrow, long day. It's going to be good. We got super Saturday. We'll see you there. All right. Take care.